Good evening from Brussels to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Faith, Food and Future Tech, Aligning AI Innovation with Sustainability and Ethical Values, organized by the Faculty of Protestant Theology and Religious Studies in Brussels, Light of Awareness International Spiritual Family, an International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation based in New York, and G20 Interfaith Forum based in Washington, D.C. My name is Elizabeta Kitanovic, and I work as a professor of human rights law, and I have the honor of serving as your moderator for this important and timely conversation. I'm delighted to be joined by a diverse and inspiring panel of experts, thought leaders, and practitioners who are working at the intersection of technology, ethics, faith, and sustainability. We are thrilled to bring together a diverse group of experts and visionaries who are exploring how artificial intelligence interacts with ethical frameworks, sustainability goals, and faith-based values. As AI continues to reshape industries, from food systems to global governance, it raises profound questions. How do we ensure technological innovation aligns with our moral responsibilities? How can AI help build not just a smarter world, but a more just and sustainable one? How do we ensure that innovation reflects our deepest values? Can AI serve not just as a progress, but also as a purpose? And how we might spiritual and ethical traditions help guide the development of technologies that impact lives and ecosystems globally? These questions are not hypothetical. The United Nations Pact for Future, Globe Digital Compact and Declaration on Future Generations from September 2024 calls on government, civil society, and the private sector to forge a shared vision for humanity. At the same time, we have European Union's AI Act setting the precedent for ethical, transparent, and human-centered AI governance. We are pleased that this evening we are all going to explore these questions and to look what kind of fundamental rights maybe can be infringed, and also to see what kind of our environmental responsibility do we have. I will over the floor and the mic to our dear colleague, Audrey Kitagawa, who is going to introduce us to the ethical values with religious profound roots that she has in her own community. And we are looking forward listening your insights. Audrey, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeta, and all co-sponsors. Thank you for the privilege to share in this discussion of faith, food, and future tech, aligning AI innovation with sustainability and ethical values. Now, for the first time in history, we must recognize the development of AI and get to know its impact upon our lives in the realms of science, education, medicine, and as today's webinar will have as its focus on the food systems or digital agriculture. AI and data-driven tools hold significant promise for transforming the world's agri-food systems towards greater efficiency, traceability, and sustainability. By leveraging AI, it is hoped that countries can improve resource management, enhance crop yields, optimize supply chains, and build more resilient food systems that are less vulnerable to climate change. However, these transformations must be guided by commitment to human rights, ethical integrity, and social justice, ensuring that the benefits of AI are shared equitably, that potential risks are mitigated. The realm of ethical integrity and having a moral compass falls squarely within the realm of faith and religious communities, which have played and continues to play significant roles in mobilizing acts of charity and compassion, including feeding the hungry and serving the poor and marginalized in society. Religious texts and teachings often emphasize the importance of caring for the needy and sharing resources, viewing such actions as essential for spiritual growth and demonstrating faith in practice. This will not change with the advent of AI in agriculture, because even now there is sufficient food to feed the world's hungry, but there are still people who don't have enough to eat. According to the UN Committee on Food Security, The world produces enough food to feed 10 billion people. In other words, there is more than enough for everyone, yet close to 1 billion people go hungry. And some of the causes of food scarcity, especially as we see it today, are conflicts, political policies that create food scarcity, displacement, climate change, and migration to flee conflicts and climate change. From the Quran, which indicates the feeding of the hungry, shows true faith through acts of kindness, to the Talmud, which views feeding the hungry as a form of service to God, to the Bible, which has numerous stories and teachings about feeding the hungry, including Jesus' miracle of feeding the multitudes with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The Catechism in the Catholic Church states that the right to food is a basic human right and emphasizes the importance of meeting people's fundamental needs. Many religions see feeding the hungry as a way to demonstrate faith and love for God and one's neighbor. Acts of charity and compassion are often seen as ways to grow in spiritual maturity and strengthen one's relationship with God. Some religious texts and traditions promise blessings and forgiveness for those who feed the hungry. Christian teachings emphasize the importance of caring for the poor and marginalized as a reflection of God's love and compassion. We all know that there is a promise in the potential of AI and other modern technologies to facilitate innovation and creativity in the agri-food systems, but there are risks as well. AI innovations and solutions must be founded on fairness, ethics, morality, and sound values. In essence, a human-centered approach. Deployment of new technologies to facilitate delivery of food from farms to tables must be managed responsibly, mindful of the environment, ethics, human rights, and social justice. The development of AI must be interdisciplinary and should engage various cultures, philosophies, beliefs, and values. Failure to include diverse viewpoints can marginalize certain groups and limit the potential of AI because it will be based on incomplete human input, missing key insights and awareness. Both large and small farming methodologies have upsides and downsides. Large-scale industrial farms, an important part of the global food supply chain, generate high yields at lower costs, but large monoculture industrial farms are responsible for soil degradation, pollution, and biodiversity loss. On the other hand, small rural farms contribute to local food security and place greater emphasis on traditional practices, organic farming, and crop rotation, which are more environmentally sustainable, but their yields are lower, requiring more labor and higher costs. Technology, AI, and modern innovations are being utilized to optimize the yields, efficiency, and profits of industrial farms. But we must consider not only how technology can help large-scale farming become more efficient and profitable, but how they can become more environmentally and socially responsible. And technological advances must be made more accessible to smallholder farms. There are millions of smallholder farms around the world that already produce about 1/3 of the world's food, and they have the potential to produce more using sustainable natural processes, but they are marginalized by poverty, climate change, and conflict. Providing even basic technology can help them access knowledge such as weather, farm management, and market information. One example of how technology can help is an app developed by the Smallholder Farmers Alliance in Haiti in conjunction with Columbia University that tracks the impact of an individual smallholder farm in terms of crop yields, effects on the environment, and women's empowerment. The farmers can not only track productivity and yield, but they are selling the data and marketing the advantages of the smallholder farm methodology. Whether in farming, processing, or distribution, application of new technologies to the elements of the food supply chain must be managed ethically with the goals of sustainability, environmental responsibility, health, and fairness at the forefront. Faith communities around the world have often been first responders to hunger and poverty, and the moral and ethical religious practice of caring for and protecting people extends to the obligation to care for all of creation, protecting and nurturing the natural world. In his 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis encouraged us to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Everything is connected, he said, and concern for the environment thus needs to be joined in a sincere love for our fellow human being and an unwavering commitment to resolving the problems of society. The sacred texts and teachings of the world's traditions all speak of the magnificence, beauty, and diversity of the natural world, and our obligation is to serve it and protect it. Everything that exists in nature is part of an interconnected, interdependent living system. This deep understanding by many shared faith traditions is a foundational truth embraced by Indigenous people in their sacred relationship to the environment, and the increased engagement of the Indigenous perspective in environmental policy and process development is shifting global conversations around climate change towards a more holistic, inclusive, and ethical approach. So the wisdom of the Indigenous people must therefore be considered in helping us to be good custodians and guardians of the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for this excellent input, especially listing theological values and also which are based on religious roots that we have. And also, I'm very glad that actually you have mentioned the importance of engaging Indigenous communities, because here in Europe, we do not do so much of engagement of Indigenous communities, but I think that is very, very important that in the future work at FPTR, of course, in partnership with you and the G20 Interfaith Forum, we actually take this more and deeper on board, especially because of this special relationship towards nature, because from a very authentic religious awareness that these communities are having and holding for centuries and millennia, actually we can learn a lot, and it's not very much known in the public space, in the civil space, about this special and specific relationship that they actually maintained. We turn to Professor Medlir Mema. So Medlir, over to you. Your bio was displayed. You are expert on IE. So this morning in Brussels, you gave presentation on different topic on IE, religious freedom and humanitarian aid. But now we go towards the EU governance and food sustainability. So over to you.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeta, and it's great seeing you again. And thank you, of course, to the panelist members for your remarks and for allowing me to participate on such an important topic. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the participants as well, those in the audience. In 2024, the United Nations convened the Summit of the Future in New York, bringing world leaders together to address mounting global challenges like climate change, inequality, digital disruption, and a stagnating path toward the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the heart of that conversation was a question that I think should concern all of us, and that is whether artificial intelligence helps us achieve sustainable development, or will it actually undermine it? And this is the kind of question that I want to explore today, perhaps not exhaustively, but at least begin the conversation. Now, of course, artificial intelligence is everywhere, from diagnosing disease to managing energy grids. AI frontier models, chatbots, AI agents have already begun transforming our world. And these technological advancements, of course, hold real promise, whether it's smarter agriculture, as was just mentioned, cleaner cities, more inclusive education and health systems. But of course, they also carry risks like soaring energy and water demands, growing digital inequality, a troubling concentration of power in the hands of a few tech giants and great powers. So the question is not whether AI can help, but rather whether it will, under current governance models, deliver the outcomes we need, especially for the most vulnerable. The UN Summit of the Future itself, organized, as I said, in September of last year, of 2024, at least in my estimation, is one of the most ambitious recent undertakings by the international community. For years, since the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' roadmap for digital cooperation, 3 years since his Our Common Agenda report in September 2021, world leaders met in September of last year in New York to discuss issues related to global governance and emerging global challenges. The subsequent adoption of the Pact for the Future, which included a global digital compact, which Elizabeta also outlined at the beginning, as well as a declaration on future generations, expressed the international community's intention to address both present and future challenges through enhanced multilateralism, digital governance, and the protection of future generations' rights. The summit itself took place against the backdrop of worsening UN Security Council dysfunction, uneven and halting progress towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, worsening global inequalities, and the disruptive influence of emerging technologies. And among the key commitments identified by world leaders in the run-up to the summit, as well as at the summit, as well as academics, civil society representatives, were the reform of international institutions, and in particular of the UN Security Council, the reallocation of some prerogatives to the UN General Assembly, the need to refocus global efforts to meet the SDGs by 2030, and redressing global inequalities by harnessing, among others, the potentially transformative power of artificial intelligence. The explosion of AI-enabled and augmented technologies, I'd argue, has rapidly elevated its importance on the global stage. Witness this panel today. Who would have thought that food, faith, and the future of tech would be on the same panel? But here we are. But this has prompted these kinds of conversations, urgent discussions on the need for international frameworks to ensure it's responsible, that is, AI's responsible development and ethical use, as well as intensive consideration of AI's potential to contribute positively to global development. Recognizing both the opportunities and the dangers, the summit called for a multilateral approach to AI governance, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and collaboration to prevent misuse while maximizing its benefits for achieving the SDGs and addressing global inequalities. Anticipating these concerns, and with the stated goal of an inclusive, open, and sustainable, fair, safe, and secure digital future for all, the Global Digital Compact outlines a series of objectives, including closing all digital divides and accelerating progress across the Sustainable Development Goals, expanding inclusion in and benefits from the digital economy for all, fostering an inclusive, open, safe, and secure digital space that respects, protects, and promotes human rights, and finally, enhancing international governance of artificial intelligence for the benefit of humanity. And now the proposed vehicle for achieving these goals, these very ambitious goals, and for translating them into reality was a combination of existing and new institutional arrangements and initiatives, which takes, quote, an agile, multidisciplinary, and adaptable multi-stakeholder approach, starting with the creation of an international scientific panel on AI, a global dialogue on AI governance, an AI standards exchange, a global fund for AI, and a global data framework. These initiatives are intended, in the words of Secretary General, to respectively promote common understanding on AI capabilities, opportunities, and risks, anchor AI governance in international norms and principles, including human rights, bridge the AI financial divide, and foster technical compatibility. The latter two, some of the biggest demands from the global south, at least at the UN summit and in the run-up to it. And finally, an AI office at the United Nations is proposed to assist in ensuring that each of these initiatives has the necessary support and carries forward the momentum. Now, the developments are in many ways a direct response to both the opportunities and challenges that many feel are associated with both the current moment through which the international rule-based order is going through and the failure to adequately address increasing global disparities. And with the world at an inflection point, much of the conversation now hinges on the potential use of AI technologies to address those global inequalities and its likely impact on climate change, the digital divide, and shift in geopolitical boundaries, to mention just some of the challenges. Now, on the environmental and climate kind of impact of AI and the discussion there, the European Commission's own study, in fact, on climate change and environmental degradation has concluded that continued unabated anthropogenic pollution and greenhouse gas emissions will further increase changing climate patterns, adding that even if all emissions from human activity suddenly stop, current concerns and threatening climate change trends would remain. And of course, these trends will continue to worsen. and the growing demand for energy to support the construction of large data centers is already visible across the world. For example, in Latin America, we have at the same time the construction of multiple data centers while also worsening conditions for agriculture. So to conclude, and I'll have more to add in continuing remarks, there is a tension is emerging between this need for accelerated and embracing emerging technologies with the demand for energy, cooling, water, and others that are needed for increasing further agricultural development, but that are now in greater demand through the development of these data centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Medlir, for this introduction to the IE and update on the global governance, and especially linked to the UN document, Pact for Future, as well, proposals for discussion in terms of the IE opportunities and risks that the present and future generations are going to deal in the present and as well in the future. So we go to Professor Maria Koutidou. So Maria, from the food perspective, you have heard this topic actually started with some reflection on theological level from Audrey. Then also Professor Medlir, he referred to it in terms of the IE food, some links in terms of the protection of the environment, which are evidently there. When I met you, we had, let's say, conversation about sustainable food. So can you a little bit elaborate on that? What is the present and what is the future of sustainable food? As Audrey has said, there is food for everybody. So no one should be hungry, but nevertheless, we face poverty. So from your perspective, how do we bridge the gap?
Hi, Elizabeta. Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I have prepared a presentation to share with you. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Maria Koutidou, and I'm a food scientist working in research and development and innovation within food systems. Today, I would like to offer my perspective as a food scientist on one of the most urgent challenges we face, the food waste, and what science is doing about this. Together, we are going to look at the global impact and how the science is helping to reimagine waste, not just as a technical issue, but as a question of sustainability, ethics, and responsibility. Let's start with something quite shocking. Imagine we are preparing a nice meal and then throwing immediately a third straight on the trash. That's essentially what we are doing globally. Every year, 1.3 billion tons of food are lost or wasted, and that's 1/3 of the food production. The waste happens across the entire supply chain from farm to fork, so from the cultivation, post-harvest, processing and packaging, distribution, and during the retail, restaurants, and of course in our homes. And this doesn't happen exactly in the same way. In high-income countries, there is an overconsumption, and most of the food waste occurs at the consumption stage, at our homes, at the restaurants. In contrast with lower-income regions, such as sub-Saharan Africa, food loss again happens there, but this happens during much earlier in the chain due to the limited infrastructure, the poor storage facilities, or outdated preservation techniques. At the chart on the right, you can see that the problem is truly global. In China alone, food waste exceeds 108 million tons annually. In Brazil, every person throws away around 95 kilograms of food each year. And this is just not numbers. They represent wasted blood, water, energy, and human effort. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture of why food waste matters. Right now, more than 343 million of people are facing acute hunger. Every year, nearly 9 million people die from hunger, including 3 million of children. At the same time, we waste the 1/3 of the food produced all over the world. Wasting of food also damages the planet. The food we waste uses up the land area larger than China every year. It consumes 45 trillion gallons of water, which is 25% of the production of the use of water in the agriculture. And when food goes to landfills, it releases methane, which is caused 8 to 10% of the global emissions, which is more than the whole aviation industry. The economic cost of the food loss and waste is estimated around $1 trillion every year. And this matters for the families because it's money wasted on food that they never get. For farmers and producers, it's lost income. And for society, it's a burden on our resources. Finally, food waste challenges us ethically. It goes against values like gratitude, moderation, and stewardship. Around the world, governments and international organizations are taking actions to make food systems more sustainable. You have heard about the farm to fork, most probably. In the European Union, we have the farm to fork strategy, which is a part of the Green Deal, and it supports local and organic farming, encouraging better labeling and aims to cut food waste and chemical use. In the United States, they have set a national goal to cut food loss and waste in half by 2030. In South Korea, households are charged for food waste by weight. The food is collected and turned into compost or feed. This is a great example of circular economy in action. And at the international level, United Nations and FAO are working also to support sustainable food production and to reduce waste globally. These are all examples show that the sustainability isn't just a scientific or personal issue, it's growing global priority, and it happens everywhere. So what food scientists and food science is doing about this? As food scientists, we help to shape more sustainable food systems from how ingredients are sourced and how products are made and packaged. We prioritize responsible sourcing, choosing raw materials that minimize environmental and societal impact. We can reformulate the products with lower impact ingredients, like, for example, plant-based ingredients. We can limit over-processing. We can design packaging that extends the shelf life and reduces waste, like, for example, recyclable, biodegradable, smart packaging, or reusable packaging. We also can transform the food waste into value, extracting, for example, fibers from orange peels or using proteins from the dairy industry like whey, contributing to a circular economy that transforms leftovers into useful ingredients. Through science, we enable food systems that are not only more efficient, but are also more ethical, plant-forward, or regenerative. Many of these ideas we just explored in food science, like reducing waste, using resources wisely, and caring about how the food is produced, are deeply connected to long-standing values found in religious and cultural traditions around the world. For example, practices like fasting, or like Ramadan, Lent, or Yom Kippur, invite reflection on our relationship with food. They remind us to pause, to show restraint, and to be grateful, values that are central to sustainability. Blessing food before meals, for example, sharing with others, and avoiding waste, they are core values in most of the religions. Building a sustainable food system isn't just a scientific challenge, it's a shared responsibility. Science can give the tools to reduce waste, to make more sustainable food. And values remind us why it matters. When innovation and care come together, we can waste less, value more, and nourish both people and planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for this very nice presentation, and with all these pictures and data that you have put in your presentation. Especially, it is important that we discuss food waste, because also in many religious communities, when we have facilities, sometimes also we are dealing with food waste. And before, in religious communities, the food waste actually was used to give actually to the poor people, you see. And then later on, of course, sometimes around the communities, it's difficult to identify the poor people who are actually needing this food. So also as religious communities, I think we should do better on that. But later on, we will come back to in our conversation to this discussion. So last panelist for tonight, for this evening, is Miss Lana Saric. Lana, good evening to you. She's our intern from Faculty of Protestant Theology and Religious Studies. And she has a very interesting presentation, and many times we have been discussing the Pact for Future, which is talking about present and future generation. So Lana, it's and present and future generation who is actually have to deal in her professional and career life, actually from the start of her professional career soon after finishing her studies, also with IE, also with global warming, with sustainability, with different, let's say, global challenges, especially that she's a student of the Faculty of Economy and Finances. And she prepared a PowerPoint presentation, feeling watched emotions, AI, HR, and new ethics of influence, because her generations and generations which are not yet born, they are going to actually deal with the influence of the AI, whether it is legally regulated or it is not legally regulated. So, Lana, let's hear from you. How do you see this global challenge?
Thank you so much, Elizabeta. So hello, everyone. Today I'll be talking about emotion AI in HR. So what if your job interview was judged not by what you said, but by how you said it? Your tone of voice, your facial expressions, even tiny movements you didn't notice, scanned and scored by a machine. And what if your employer could track your mood at work, or a government could guess how you're feeling about politics just by analyzing your face? Now, this is the world of emotion AI, which is a fast-growing part of artificial intelligence called effective computing. And we are seeing this technology move into human resources in how people are hired and monitored. So emotion AI, also known as effective computing, is about teaching machines to recognize, interpret, and respond to human emotions. So in HR, emotion AI is already being used. Companies are scanning job applicants' facial expressions and voice during interviews. They're using AI tools to rate performance based on microexpressions, and they are monitoring employee mood to boost productivity. Now, emotion AI promises a more natural interaction between humans and machines, but it also raises serious questions, because emotions are complex and context matters, and these systems can misinterpret, nudge, or even manipulate. So while technology brings new possibilities, it also comes with new risks, such as bias, ethical gray zones, and the erosion of autonomy. And emotion AI doesn't just look at your CV. It looks at your face, your tone, your gaze, even how you sit or type. And so this is not just personal data, it is emotional data. But here's the catch. Most people don't realize for what it is being collected or how it's being used, because algorithms often work like black boxes. You don't know what goes in, and you don't know how it decides. So where's the line here between innovation and invasion? And that's why in the EU, we have two main regulations. First, the GDPR, which protects personal data, and second, the new AI Act, which regulates how AI systems are developed and used. And they both share values like transparency and accountability. But even these laws are struggling to keep up, because the AI Act is the first step. But many companies still can't explain what their algorithms are doing, let alone control them. And small companies often don't have the resources to audit or fix their AI systems. And meanwhile, the risks are very real, because in one Belgian case, a hiring algorithm was trained using IP addresses, and it ended up favoring people from one wealthy suburb over another more diverse neighborhood, without anyone noticing until much later. In another case, a company's automated system stopped hiring women entirely for certain roles. Now, because the system had learned from biased historical data. And these are not just technical issues, they are ethical ones. And in HR, the stakes are human. So emotion AI is not just a tool, it can also be a method of control. And these systems can be biased, culturally tone deaf, and easily misused. But the real issue is this: who has the power to use them and why? Governments, employers, and platforms can now respond to your emotional state in real time. And that means that influence can be tailored based on how you're feeling. And this is not neutral, it's strategic. So a recruiter might favor calm voices, a politician might target anxious voters, and a company might nudge workers who show signs of burnout. So these systems often reinforce existing discrimination, because AI learns from past patterns. And when bias is built into the system, it scales. Remember the previous slide's example when AI was rejecting women for months. Now, that's not a glitch. That is a pattern that is encoded. And it doesn't stop at work, because AI is now also used in politics. It's writing personalized messages, tracking voter sentiment, and tailoring emotional influence across platforms. And some candidates even test digital clones, they're called psychochats, to simulate empathy and build false intimacy with voters. So it's not just about privacy here, it's about democracy, labor rights, and social equity. And the biggest risk is not knowing it's happening. But it's very much happening, because as you can see on the graph on the right side, it shows the sharp increase in the number of AI-related legal cases in the US from 2000. Now, here's the thing. AI expects emotional consistency, but humans, we are messy. We frown when we are focused. We sigh when we are thinking. We are not standardized. And yet, this is the direction we are heading to. Now, imagine your workplace as a mirror. You're prompted to smile. Your stress is flagged before you even feel it. And HR quietly nudges your mood to align with productivity goals. And this is not fiction, because, for example, Amazon patented a wristband that uses ultrasonic pulses to track workers' hand movements. So if you pause, it vibrates to get you back on task. And they've also explored technology to detect emotional states, linking stress to productivity or identifying when someone's not focused enough. Now, take that logic and apply it to office jobs. Through webcams and wearables, emotional AI tracks your engagement, tone, and expressions. Now, this is where I think of my mother, because if her office had emotional tracking tech, she would be fired before lunch, not for doing anything wrong, just for being in a mood. And she is not alone. Humans are not consistent. We are not always on. And excessive monitoring doesn't always make us feel supported. It can actually make us feel watched. So while emotional AI may be smart, it is still artificial. So emotion AI can detect a trembling voice or a raised heart, but it can label that as stress or sadness. And here's the difference. It doesn't feel anything. So we have to ask, can a machine ever really understand empathy or dignity? So yes, AI can simulate empathy. It can say the right thing at the right moment, but it doesn't care. It calculates. However, AI can also help in a way. It can support mental health apps, guide conversation, and even flag distress early. But emotional data is still deeply personal, and technology will keep evolving. But empathy, real empathy, is ancient, and it's still irreplaceable. Because when it comes to feeling deeply, responding authentically, and being truly present, we are still the best technology that there is. So at this point, the question is not whether emotion AI should exist, but how it should be used and under what conditions. So if emotional technologies are entering the workplace, education, healthcare, and politics, they must be governed by principles that protect human dignity, privacy, and freedom. So I won't go much in detail because of the time here, but I think the core priorities when it comes to emotional AI should be clear ethical guidelines, transparency in algorithmic decision-making, purpose limitation, also safeguards against bias, and lastly, international alignment. So to conclude, emotion AI is already part of how we work and communicate. It can offer real value, helping us detect stress, support well-being, and improve communication. But the question we are left with here is, how can we use this technology to foster human flourishing, not control? And let me end with something simple. To be seen is not to be known. So we might detect someone's sadness, but that doesn't mean we understand their story. And no system, no matter how advanced, can replace the depth of real human connection. So yes, let's keep build better tools, better AI tools, but let's also protect what makes us human, our ability to listen, to reflect, and to be present. Thank you so much for your attention. And here are some further readings and a video that I found interesting for you to maybe explore throughout my research. And here are the resources I used for building this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lana, for completing your task perfectly. As always, you know, after your presentation, I'm counting my days to retirement because I don't know how the world is going to continue like living with all this surveillance if they are not legalized in a sense that they are really human-centric and really there to protect human dignity. So thank you so much. That just shows that actually the present generations have a lot of responsibility to participate decision making on the IE legislative instruments and mechanisms, simply that they are controlled in and actually serve to protect human dignity and not to exploit human dignity, as you have said, and all of you in your presentation. And also it's very important actually that the gender, let's say, balance, it's also there, especially because of the discrimination and all these different discriminatory grounds that we found sometimes ourselves discriminated, either it's gender or it's religious or it's racial or it's ethnic or anything else, or intersection of all of this. Actually, all that leads us that we have to work together. And I am very pleased that actually this evening we have very diverse panel. So from religious, scientific, different, let's say, scientific fields, like from the food and the global governance, and also and present and future generation that young people represents. And of course, we all care what kind of role we are going to leave them, and what kind of role actually we are going to build for those who are not born yet. So we have next 20 minutes for discussion among our panelists. And I would like actually to start with Audrey. Audrey, you had actually raised and made actually comparative analysis of the different theological texts that are actually used at the present time and were used in the past as a moral compass for the societies and religious communities, creating the narrative in the society, how people should relate to each other. How do we relate to our neighbor as individual, then also as community vis-a-vis their communities based on different sorts of social teaching, and actually making the society very participative, you know, like that actually we engage different religious communities being engaged in global conversations. From your very rich experience in New York and you being linked strongly to UN different forums, is there enough space to bring these questions and concerns towards, let's say, global leadership? And this is one question. Are there enough platforms? Is there enough public space for it? Is there enough media space? And the second question to you is, how do you see religious activities of religious communities? Some are active, some are passive, some need a little bit more knowledge, you know, or more, let's say, interest on the global insights, because sometimes we think that the global level is too far away from the local community, so we don't have big wish to engage with the global questions, while still the global, let's say, legislation influence and actually international laws are influencing also our national legislation as well as constitutions, and of course they come also to the local level. So how do you see these challenges?
Thank you so much, Elizabeta. Yes, the questions that you pose are huge questions. However, we must understand that faith communities are often historically on the ground within their communities. So how do we see the activities of religious communities and having the global insight? So it can be very difficult to do that, because faith communities are very community-based. And therefore, you're going to have the enculturation processes, the values of that particular faith community, but also we see that they provide valuable services to their communities, you know, whether it's providing food, you know, medical services, etc., because they have been very instrumental in being on the ground presence. And you want to be able to connect them to global organizations, like, for example, UNICEF. It is a department in the United Nations that they wanted to have the vaccination of the children for polio or measles. They contacted faith leaders so it could help facilitate the entry of the vaccinations into the faith communities and the communities at large. And their work was very instrumental in helping to eradicate polio and measles. On the other hand, there have been certain faith leaders who also indoctrinated their communities to say, don't take these vaccines because it'll cause sterilization, etc. So you always have to look at the cultural context as well as the teachings of the particular faith leaders, because they have huge influence on their respective communities. So to bring it into the global world, however, we have to see how the processes and the implementation of practices on the ground can either enhance the global scene or actually become impediments to it. So, for example, the vaccination process. So when they had the cooperation of the faith leaders, the vaccinations went very well. And the delivery of necessary food, like, for example, UNICEF again, being able to distribute food into local communities that, face starvation, they do rely on the faith leaders. So to the extent you have faith leaders who will cooperate and work with global agencies, they have proven to be very instrumental in showing the global impact of localized communities that have around the world. So that's a very, very important thing for us to keep in mind, as UNICEF has so far shown the efficaciousness of engaging with faith leaders on the ground. And the other question that you asked, global leadership, is there enough public space and media space? And again, this takes us to the issue of the values and the ethics, because, you can shape the worldview of the people that you are dealing with. And at all times, we must remember the sacred teachings of the great masters who have come to us over the eons. And a great master who roamed this earth 2,500 years ago said, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That is a very, very important universal and eternal universal truth, because as I listened to Lana's presentation, frankly, it's quite frightening how AI can be utilized to spread widely lies and distortions. And of course, we have seen that in elections, national elections, and the mobilization of some faith communities to help, support untruths. And so whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, we all have to be educated and to remember the essence of the sacred teachings, because that would always be foundational in our human relationships. And we should always remember, how far do you think our human relationships can go if you can't trust the person? If, they are known to be chronic liars. So it's always going to boil down to, regardless of AI, the human to human relationship. So AI may outstrip us in many levels. And I hate to think that they will outstrip us on emotional intelligence. But if we can adhere to the values that we have grown up with the important sacred texts, then we should be able to come through in one piece, because the information provided by Lana has been actually quite frightening. And the issue of whether it can support us, AI can support us or control us, is a very important issue. The book, George Orwell's book, 1984, is very, very pertinent here, and we should all review and read that book again.
Thank you, Audrey, for this exciting input. And I will just bring Maria into the conversation, because you have been mentioning the issue with the food and with vaccination. And in the chat, there is actually a question and invitation for cooperation, Audrey, to you from Burkina Faso, West Africa, from the colleague Peace activist and indigenous rights defender, who says that she's very happy to attend this webinar, and that she is a pastoralist community in West Africa and interested in connecting with you. And she actually posted her email address for follow-up, Audrey, personally to you. But just to come back to Maria, I mean, you have been actually presenting all legislative frame in terms of from farm to fork, different, let's say, concepts and the best practice from South Korea. How far we are in Europe from that kind of standard in recycling food, that there is food simply for everybody, and from what Audrey mentioned as well in terms of feeding people, that they simply live their life in dignity because there is enough for everybody. We just don't have the culture of enough yet developed.
Yes, Elizabeta, a really nice question and valid comments. How far we are in Europe? Actually, there are specific policies, what I mentioned already. So EU is taking some measures and to reduce the CO2 emissions. For example, I don't know if you heard about the Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, maybe in previous presentations, webinars, you heard about this. So actually all companies, because I work also in the food industry, we take measures now and we try to reduce our emissions. And meaning that this will be the same for all the companies in Europe. So we really have to comply with this policy. Regarding the food waste, okay, of course, we try, for example, to reduce the food waste as food scientists with making different formulations, trying to make to use ingredients that they are more sustainable, to bring more sustainable food in the market. We try also to reduce packaging, for example. This is something really important. So most of the packaging will be recyclable and reusable. The point is that is going to happen. So the packaging will be recyclable, but who is going to do this? In Belgium, we are both in Belgium. We know that the recycling industry, it's very big. So indeed this happens, but this doesn't mean that it will happen in all over the Europe and also in all over the world. So there are a lot of measures and policies, which is really good. It's a positive step. We go to this direction that we have to go. But then it's also up to us to change our habits. We have to change the way that we live. We have to stop this overconsumption. Even if there are a lot of different rules and policies, we have to take steps ourselves as human beings. So we have to change the way that we live. This is regarding food waste. Regarding packaging, we discussed. So there are a lot of things that we can do. But it's really the next step. It's up to us what we're going to do.
Thank you so much for this explanation. And I believe very strongly that in the religious sectors, in the academia, but also in religious communities, we need to discuss actually more food sustainability, how to do it actually. Because if there are not every religious community has professionals in terms of who do have food expertise, that they can advise religious communities, like how to deal with less leftovers, how to make less for the feast. And both of us, we are coming from these traditions, which are actually the more cooking, the better. It doesn't matter if everything is spent, in fact, and so on. Sometimes in some communities, we are overdoing it, even though we don't need to do it. Maybe there needs to be some rationalization towards the food and festivities. But nevertheless, I think that this discussion on food, that actually we create appropriate food culture, would be something really important, and to be simply in line with religious-based values. And to come back to Lana and to Medlir, so both of you are working and you have a deep interest in the AI sector. Medlir as a professor who is running the Global Institute related to the AI topics. Lana is the present and future generation who will need to live daily with AI developments, whether they are legal or illegal. You know, we hope that in the EU they are going to remain strictly legal, that actually the EU will impose the implementation or mandatory of the different legal acts from GDPR, of course, which is mandatory, to the new documents that the EU is developing compared to US, for example, because today with Medlir we just had discussed how actually there are different perspectives and ideas to, let's say, limit the use of AI. So Medlir, how you see in these developments in the US compared to EU?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's actually a very important one. Just yesterday, talking to actually a friend of mine who was working in the previous administration and just trying to get a sense of developments in the United States. Well, I think there's a few trends I think are emerging with regards to artificial intelligence and the governance of AI generally in the United States. One of them, of course, a broad trend, which is towards deregulation. If until now there was this soft touch kind of approach, this gentle touch approach on all of the above types of approach, that is industry proposing some normative guidelines, and then you have state governments that are also creating their respective offices, and each of them trying to figure out, how to approach this question of AI regulation. And then you had the federal government, which had like the safety approach to it, recommending different perhaps gentler types of regulations. We're moving away from that with the current administration. In the latest bill presented to the U.S. Congress, by the U.S. Congress rather, that's been approved by the House of Representatives. In that bill, there's a proposal for a 10-year moratorium over any kind of legislation that currently exists in the United States. And what that would do, of course, is that it would do away with any kind of guardrails at a time, I would argue, when we need those guardrails the most. Imagine there are discussions about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and there are other more apocalyptic kind of conversations about artificial superintelligence. And to head into this era next decade of potential AGI and potential ASI without any guardrails is really problematic, at least from my perspective. But it's clear the United States has decided that when it comes to this AI race, that they see it as a global race. They want to make sure they don't have any hands tied. Now, you would think that the Europeans would perhaps provide a foil or perhaps refuge in terms of governance. But what has actually been happening for the last year is that both European Union as well as European governments generally have been favoring deregulation rather than more regulation. So even the EU AI Act, which has only been now, and an AI office has only been around for 1 year, are actually under some threat. Actually, just today, we had another conversation with somebody from the European Union who was arguing that perhaps the status of the EU AI office itself may not necessarily be to completely confirmed, right? Whereas the AI Act may have some legal standing, it is not clear that the AI office within the EU has to be there. So there are already rumors within the European Union of doing away with something like that. And of course, that is confirmed by what happened in February when the French government invited all the different countries and different tech sectors and NGOs and think tanks to Paris, and they renamed what until then was known as the AI Safety Summit to an AI Action Summit. And the implication there is that the French and the Europeans generally were open for business, and they no longer were willing to stand by. And of course, when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia and others, they're not playing this regulation game. Of course, China has a very deep, I'd argue, and variable a regulatory framework, but it's one that is more meant to kind of favor government control and surveillance and centralization of data collection and monitoring, rather than actually the advance of AI itself, which is very much being supported by the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. So all of this to say that we are entering an era that is going to see a lot more investment in AI, that is going to see a lot more demand for resources in AI, and to perhaps conclude a thought that I started, and because of time, I tried to kind of wrap it up, and I'll add a little bit more in my closing comments. There is more and more demand now for these resources for for resources like energy intensive or minerals or water resources that traditionally would go towards economic development, agricultural development, food production, right, sustainability, but that now actually go towards the development of artificial intelligence. And it is in AI models, training, and others, or data centers. And the challenge that we have, of course, the concern that we have is that that is going to dilute, and it's going to actually create a lot of pressure on existing environmental kind of models that we have, climate change models and others. And that, of course, is going to put pressure and maybe collapse the whole kind of climate ecosystem that we have. So again, I'll add a little bit more to this in my closing comments, but just to point out that we are heading into an era that is going to be very unstable, very unpredictable, and very difficult at a moment when also regulation is being done away with.
Thank you so much, Medlir. I would invite everybody to post their questions in the chat. But we have actually the first question, and that is for Medlir, for you. So if you were to advise an African government today on the top 3 priorities to include in a national AI strategy aimed at enhancing good governance, what would you recommend?
Oh, thank you. Excellent, excellent question. Well, first would be, I think, doing away with the data bias. So making sure that the data that you're training on is actually complete and it is not biased, and it's not just the data itself, but also the algorithms upon which that data is training. The second one would be transparency of that. One of the biggest concerns, especially in the developing world, is this concern with digital authoritarianism. And then the other side of that conversation is, of course, surveillance capitalism. So to what end are we using these products? Is it because everybody's using these products, or is it because we are going to achieve something? And the third one is the sustainability question. This data sovereignty movement that we're seeing, and increasingly we're going to see every country is going to develop their own, obviously, AI policy, and they should, but also everybody's going to also centralize data collection, monitoring, processing in their own countries. That's going to be very resource intensive. How sustainable is it for those countries? Is it absolutely necessary? And is it important? So you have to have a legal framework to begin with about how the data is going to be used and how that's going to be monitored. Transparency has to be important, but then the sustainable use of these kinds of technologies also must be important.
Thank you so much for answering this question. We have another question from the FPTR PhD candidate PC. He's from Ghana. So he is asking, how does the outcomes of these insightful scholarly lectures and research affect and impart the grassroots of our societies and communities? I think, Audrey, you're the closest to respond to this question.
So, with respect to scholarly lectures and research, and how does it, impart to the grassroots or societies and communities? Well, I think, in some ways, AI is going to help facilitate this kind of information actually getting into the grassroots as availability becomes more and more prominent. And as Professor Mema already indicated that each country is going to start to accelerate their cultivation of AI, and we will see that each country is going to be trying to harness as much information as possible and develop their AI technologies. So as countries develop these technologies, we will see that the access to people on the ground is going to become more prevalent. So scholarly works as well will become, available as well. And actually, if already on the net, you can access all kinds of information that was not available just within a few short years. And I actually had a doctor tell me that sometimes the patients are more well informed about their condition. So I think this kind of information accessibility, whether it's in the medical field or in food technologies, or, I was just reading this morning's New York Times, and there's an app that you can download that will tell you when you go to the grocery store, you scan an app and it'll tell you whether to buy or not buy because it's not healthy. So, it's just immense, the collapsing of the gap of information and availability and accessibility of information to communities on the ground. So in that sense, it kind of neutralizes everybody's ability to be able to have information, because information can be knowledge, but we have to be able to have the discernment process. And I see Professor Mema's hand just went up. And, so Elizabeta, I think this kind of accessibility to information is going to be available to hopefully everybody on the ground, but we still have to exercise discernment processes because there's so much rubbish on the internet as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Just a very quick intervention. I've spoken too much already, but just to build on what was just said, information can be both a blessing and a curse. And I'd argue that probably the value of this conversation and these types of conversations is twofold. One of them is identifying and building a network of individuals that are very much interested in these types of issues. And connected to that is also the discussion on AI literacy. AI literacy is what's going to help us make sense of the information. Right? If we only have information, then we'll find it very difficult to have and to do much with it. There was a discussion earlier also by Dr. Kitagawa, I believe, about misinformation and disinformation. You're more likely to be subject to that kind of stuff and fall prey if you don't have AI literacy. And so I think probably the biggest thing that we need to be thinking about, if you're talking about grassroots movements, and if there's something that you want to do locally, AI literacy, right? There's a lot of courses already in line. Encourage people to become more and more AI literate. Japan right now is actually collaborating with Microsoft to train 3 million Japanese high school students in AI literacy. Okay, that's an important kind of development to have at a national level, and I think especially in developing worlds and developing countries, it's very important that we develop, because I think also AI can be a tool for development and for growth. You can kind of leapfrog certain stages of development if you can actually jump onto the fourth industrial revolution, but you can't do that if you don't have an AI literate population.
Thank you so much, Medlir, for this response and actually bridging the gap with different perspective on AI. Actually, I have a question for Lana. Lana, when you listen all of this now from religious perspective, we had an input. Then Medlir was explaining the situation on the global governance level and what are actually the differences between the EU and the US and comparison with China. Maria came with some explanation related to food, with some good practice which is coming from South Korea. In this webinar, we actually connected 3 very important topics. This is faith, food that we all need, and AI that we are already all using. So how do you see these challenges? Because you will, once you finish your studies, you will be in a process of looking for a job. Of course, as part of your job from day one, you're going to use artificial intelligence, and actually you already do, but then it's going to be on another level. How this looks to you? I mean, that is, let's say, normal, like what was after COVID, like new normal for us, let's say older people, let's say older generations. But for you, actually, you live with AI every day. So what are your expectations in terms of job market? Is it too difficult to live with these new developments, to be updated all the time, to look for the information? Or for you, this is just ordinary thing? Like,
No, it's definitely not ordinary at all. Because I remember about 2 years ago, I think AI just came out and my friends were using it, and I was the one against it. I was like, I'm not going to use this ever. Why are you doing that? We're going to become lazy, not think for ourselves. That was my first opinion. And I was like, okay. Then 3 months later, I fell for it and I started using it. And then I also got hooked to it. And then I understood why people have the temptation to go on it and ask to do something faster than you can. So it's a thing, like you cannot not follow the new trend, let's say. You have to follow, because you will be the one disadvantaged, I think. I also had a professor, I did an AI class this year in a university, and the professor there said, like, you have to learn to prompt. That will be the new skill, she said. And it is true, I think. And as Professor Mema said, in Japan, they're already working on it. And I think it's a great example of how upcoming generations are going to be, that's going to be a skill, I think, required. So yes, it is a lot to take. And it is something that I will also have to work on, is to work with AI, discover the new tools, what's out there, and really optimize that and use it to my advantage and not the other way around. So it is very important. It is overwhelming. There's a lot more coming, and I think it's important to follow up with everything. But it's definitely not ordinary, no.
Thank you, Lana. Here there is a comment from Nevena Saric. So she says, this is already happening. AI literacy in Belgium. To address these concerns, the European Union introduced the Artificial Intelligence Act, which took effect on August 1st, 2024. This legislation mandates specific employer obligations starting from 2nd February 2025, so a few months back, to ensure the responsible use of AI in the workplace. New employer obligations from February 2025, companies deploying AI systems from workforce management must comply with stringent regulations designed to enhance transparency and worker protection. Mandatory employees training on AI. Any employee interacting with AI tools must receive training on AI fundamentals, applications, and risks. Training must include recognizing and mitigating AI-related risks. Employees should understand the challenges such as data privacy concerns and algorithmic bias, learning how to address them, and then applying critical thinking to the AI results. AI-generated outputs are not infallible. Employees must assess their accuracy and determine when human input is necessary. Thank you, Nevena, for this clarification. As you are dealing with HR questions, this is very good to know actually what is mandatory also here for us in Belgium, that actually we need, if our employer didn't offer us this AI training, that actually legally we have a right to do so. And that would be really great if these trainings would be provided on all levels in the, let's say, in the EU, in all companies, in all private sectors and governmental sectors, and etc. So we have still 15 minutes, and I will start slowly wrapping up and invite all the panelists to have conclusionary comments. Actually, I just see. Okay, before that, there is last question, and then we go to the conclusionary comments, because we have 2 2 minutes more. So just to come back, what are the 3 most important specific faith-based goals for AI in food systems?
Well, although it's not my expertise, we have seen that AI goes everywhere, indeed, in the food industry as well. We used AI to see, for example, consumer preferences, to see what are the trends in the future with AI, or even to design some foods to see what we can do in the future. So AI indeed goes everywhere, even in the food industry. I'm not the expert on AI, so I cannot really say a lot of things about this and how it links with food, but for sure, it's everywhere. In all industries, we see that there is a lot of AI usage as well. It's incredible what we can do. But as a closing comment, I would say indeed we heard a lot about faith, food, AI, which maybe they don't look so similar, but at the end there is a connection and everything is connected. And if you see at the end, it's especially about the meaning, the dignity, the care. We talk about sustainability. It's about the care of the environment, of the planet, and there also the presentation of Lana, AI at work. It's about to see the care to the people, of how AI goes in the work environment. At the end, it's everything about the people and what we do about this.
Thank you, Maria, for your conclusionary comments. We always need to have human-centric approach with no matter in which sector we work, because we want actually to improve the living conditions for everybody with zero tolerance to poverty and any difficulties, which includes actually basic living. So, Audrey, what would be from your side conclusionary comments to this webinar on faith, food, and artificial intelligence after hearing all these inputs?
Thank you so much, Elizabeta. So if we recall, there are millions of people who die from hunger-related causes every year. And with close to 1 billion people suffering from hunger around the world, it really is essential that new ideas and innovations be welcome and utilized to increase food production and refine and expedite supply chain issues. But that's not the only thing. As our panelists have so richly shared, we also have to look at aspects of food waste and how that also plays a role in starvation. Also, we have not done a deep dive into political processes and decisions that actually create hunger and starvation. So that's a whole nother important topic to explore. So the, increasing supply chain issues, et cetera, are all excellent, as we need to consider how to, expand the food availability. But also we must not forget that political decisions play a huge role in creating starvation, and primarily because of the conflicts that they create. So, businesses, systems, and organizations, including the agri-food system, must be mindful of human rights, gender rights, sustainability, equitability, and the rule of law, as Professor Mema had so importantly shared in his presentation. And equality must be considered as new technologies are rolled out. But the incredible speed of the development of AI is creating a sense of urgency to get on board and utilize all the new bells and whistles, but there are many concurring consequences associated with heedless use of these technologies. And that's why UNESCO's Ethics of Artificial Intelligence, which very clearly states the inherent dignity of every human being constitutes the foundation for the universal system of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Therefore, respect protection, and promotion of human dignity and rights as established by international law, including international human rights law, is essential throughout the life cycle of AI systems. And new technologies need to provide new means to advocate, defend, and exercise human rights and not infringe upon them. And AI and other rapidly developing technological innovations must be consistent with human-centric values, as you had mentioned, Elizabeta, and appropriate oversight and safeguards are essential to ensure that human rights and justice are protected and that the use of technologies is moral, ethical, and aligned with the fundamental values of caring for all of creation and leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey, for these remarks. We go to Medlir. What would your conclusionary comments?
I'll first take a stab at Professor Roberts' provocative question. And first of all, also issue a challenge to him to think about those three specific faith-based goals for AI and food systems and hopefully contribute. He's a AI food law professional, so probably be well placed in this panel. So perhaps next time, but I'll take at least two immediate specific faith-based goals. So one is, I think any question of AI in food systems should privilege sustainability. And second, it should, together with that, would be the divine nature, I think, that we all have as human beings. And I think that is an important question if we were to look at this from a faith-based goal for AI and food systems. Sustainability, and I think the importance, the centrality of human life in the creation. And really the conversation has been going so far as it's a good way to for me to build up a little bit and to wrap up with some of my comments. According to a recent study by Epoch AI, the cost of training frontier AI models has grown by a factor of 2 to 3 times per year for the past 8 years, suggesting that the largest models will cost over $1 billion by 2027, with amortized hardware and energy costs for the final training run of frontier models growing at the fastest at a rate of 2.4 times per year since 2016. So that's that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about. Now, even though DeepSeek seems to have changed the paradigm, I'm not quite sure that is necessarily the story is complete there. Now, the growing demand for energy to support the construction of large data centers is already visible across the world, including many parts of Global South. For example, in Latin America, which is seen as an attractive investment destination due to the region's strategic geographic location and relatively low operating costs, major operators such as Equinix or Telmex or Microsoft and Google Cloud, are further boosting actually the region's growth. So that's the good news. However, in places like the municipality of Colón, for example, in central Mexican state of Querétaro, this AI boom has meant an investment to the tune of $10 billion for new data centers. Again, good news, employment and revenue. But the increased investments in data centers has coincided with increased demands for water resources at a time when the region's farmers are actually faced with droughts and difficult decisions brought on by water rationing, leading to crop failure. And this is where I go back to some of those governing principles that you have to keep sustainability and human life at the heart of this and not fetishize data collection, data centralization, and data processing. So this makes a relationship, I'd argue, between resource use and growth in AI-related investments even more complicated, with AI seen as playing a key role in making processes more efficient through agricultural robotics. And this was mentioned by Dr. Kitagawa early on about the fact that through AI, we may actually get better and more efficient food collection. However, there seems to be this paradox. On one hand, AI sucks resources away from food production and sustainability. On the other hand, we need it to actually maintain and to produce more resources. And so this seems to be a very difficult kind of situation to be in. So AI's ability to analyze vast data sets and assist in decision-making is viewed as crucial also in tackling climate change. So we need AI to help us tackle climate change while using resources to get AI to help us with climate change makes climate change even worse. And so that's a kind of dilemma. Those are the kinds of challenges that we're dealing with. And so there is a general consensus, especially just to conclude on this, prevalent in Silicon Valley, with a prevailing narrative being that AI and technology will enable humanity to transcend its limitations and overcome our most entrenched challenges. But the reality is that its limitations and AI as a tool itself amplifies both the best and the worst aspects of human nature. So in light of growing inequality and persistent digital divide, coupled with the shifting dynamics of global geopolitics, the need for future-proofing developmental policies has never been more urgent.
Thank you, Medlir. Lana, last comments from you, from your side?
Yes, so thank you. But first, I wanted to say that it's been really inspiring to hear from experts share their expertise on diverse topics throughout this webinar. So thank you for that. So to wrap up, I've talked about how emotion AI is entering human resources and what that means for privacy, power, and ethics. So yeah, we've seen how these systems can offer insight, but also carry the risk of control, especially when emotional data is used without clear limits. So limits are needed to be put in place. And as we move forward, I believe we need to protect what makes us human, which is our unpredictability, our right to feel, and our ability to choose how we are understood. So that means designing technology with care and always putting human dignity at the center of the conversation. So thank you again for this opportunity, huge opportunity to contribute to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists for participating to this webinar on faith, food, and future tech, aligning with AI innovation, with sustainability and ethical values. You have all underlined that the human dignity needs to be in center of all policies, whether it is food or it's AI or it's environment or it's employment. Actually, without human-centric legislation, it's not going to be good for anyone actually living and giving its best to the present and future generations. So thanks to Audrey, to Medlir, to Maria, and to Lana for their inputs. And I would like especially to thank our partner organizations, like Light of Awareness, International Spiritual Family, and International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation, with whom also earlier we have been making partnership as FPTR, as well to the G20 Interfaith Forum, who is actually our also long-standing partner, where Audrey and myself are actually participating in the advisory council. So thank you so much. Have a nice evening and see you next academic year.